Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 6, Episode 23, Profit and Lace. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great. We're a pretty good time and we are almost at the end of this show. So you should really want to tune in. Actually, go back and watch the stuff and then come back and join us. And hopefully you can really enjoy it even more than what you have been before. Okay. Um, Obviously we have a lot that we're going to be talking about tonight, but before we jump into anything else, I just want to remark on the fact that we did lose former president Jimmy Carter as of this date, um, in 2024. So sad, very long-lived humanitarian. He did a lot for homelessness and dealing with the Habitat for Humanity in particular. It's probably like one of the major things he was known for after he um, left the presidency and beyond. But yeah, he passed tonight, and just wanted to make sure that we remarked on the fact that he did pass. So whatever your leanings, political leanings, so forth and so on, I don't think anybody can deny the fact that he was a great person, a great man, great husband, father, and yeah, great humanitarian. I think I'm going to stand by that more than anything else.
Yeah, I was reading something about him today as after he had passed, and it was pointing out that even if people didn't think he was a great president, he did lose his second election. He always maintained high personal numbers. People always thought that he, as an individual, was a good man, even if they didn't agree that he was as good a president, maybe as they would have wanted. So, yeah, sad to hear that someone has died, especially someone. I mean, he was 100. I mean, gosh, can you
Yeah,
imagine making it to 100?
100 years old.
Um, yeah, I mean, I just can't even think. How much will the world change by the time I would reach 100? It's just
Witnessing a
crazy to
hundred
think.
years, yeah, 100 years of history of and being a major part of it, even
Mhm.
leader of the free world, as it was. So I mean, it just
Yeah.
to have that kind of impact on the time in which you live, and knowing that like he will be a person who will be talked about and studied for generations to
Yeah.
come, just like a lot of the presidents are. So I mean, it's an amazing thing, I think, to have as a part of your overall legacy.
Yep.
And yeah, he's like you said, I think of him more as a great man, not necessarily a great president. It doesn't really factor in for me sometimes that he was a president. I mean, it's significant, true, but at the same time, it's like I think about all the humanitarian things he did before, during, and after his presidency that really kind of stand out to me.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yep.
but
Yep.
now to,
This will
to
be a
shift
day
gears
that
again,
history books will record. So, sorry.
absolutely. But no, that's okay. So we could. I just wanted to remark on that really quick before we dive into our fictitious world here that we love so much. With this episode, Profit and Lace. Woo! I
Yeah.
don't know what to say about this episode. It was unique. It
Yeah.
was it was different. That's
Yeah.
that's about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now, before we get into all of that, of course, I like to do our weekly check-in. So, David, how has your week been?
Week's been fine. We did record our most recent episode a little bit closer together because we had some delays. We're getting actually recording it, and so we recorded it right before Christmas. It's been now after Christmas. It's now not quite the new year. Christmas Day was fun, seeing the family and especially my nieces. Having a good day with them. They are currently out in New Mexico skiing. Now that the Christmas holiday has passed, so my brother sent some videos of the 7-year-old learning to ski today, which was just great. Apparently, they were having a great time. Um, and yeah, work has been decent, which is good. Because kind of, you might remember Perry. People sometimes call it the 13th month. The last week of the year. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe that's a thing. I've never been 100% convinced of that,
So
but anyway,
so I just want to explain
I
that
think it's worth
really
thing. So
I just want to explain that really quick. This whole 13th month thing used to make me so upset. But we had a particular district manager who really tried to sell us on this idea of a 13th month. And basically what they mean is obviously it's a very short amount of time, but in theory, if done right, you can make all of the same amount of sales and then some that you would make in a regular month, but just at this time, therefore making it a 13th month. 'Cause it's like you had an extra month to do sales. I think I've only heard of
right,
maybe 2 people in the entire market when I worked, for Mattress Firm actually doing that and making it successful. Other than that, it was
right,
a lot of manipulation. It was a lot of people who, like, would intentionally schedule things to go out at a certain time to kind of inflate numbers around this time and things like that, A lot of that was going on in order to kind of, give this appearance of something that wasn't really true. And I obviously haven't
right.
worked for a mattress firm in quite some time now. I don't know if they're still allowing people to do those kinds of things, but it was more of a time to play fast and loose with numbers so that you could make an extra bump on your bonus. So, and I used to just hate the phrase when it would come
Right.
around 13th month because in my head it was like, oh, you're all getting ready to be extra schemy and cheaters and so forth. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
extra incentive to cheat. Gotcha.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It always felt weird, and no one in my current company ever said 13th month. But my time at mattress firm still,
yeah,
rattles around in my
yeah,
head. So, but yeah, that's been
yeah,
fine.
and you kinda gotta do this. You kinda gotta get that slick off you. Yeah.
Yeah. My former
Oh,
roommate came in for a few days, so he's here right now at the house, spending sleeping on the couch for a few days just to say hi. Um, and so it's fun to see him. He'll be here for a few more days. Yeah, not much else. How about you? Anything new? How was your Christmas?
Christmas was great. I've really enjoyed this week. I've been making my daughter watch old movies with me.
Mm.
Some Christmas movies, some not. We watched um, the Lego Batman movie, which
Ooh,
so we did
yeah.
this. So we did this just a couple of days ago. We watched the
The
Lego
Lego
Batman movie.
Batman movie. I got all the sets right there, baby.
Well, so then you'll remember in the Lego Batman movie, there's a moment when Batman, or no, it's the Joker, goes to the Phantom Zone. And in the Phantom Zone, it's supposed to be a collection of all the big bads, right? But instead of them
Mm.
being like the big bads from like the DC universe, it's all of the big bads. So like
Warner Brothers.
Voldemort's in
Yeah.
there. Yeah, Voldemort's in there. King Kong's in
Sauron.
there. Dracula's in there. Sauron's in there. The Gremlins are in there. Like stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I was cracking up watching it because they were all, all there. And then they even had Daleks in there, which that was funny
Yeah.
because they wouldn't say what they were. It was like they're evil British robots. And then someone said, what? Like you hear like these little sides, and someone says, what? And he's like, ask your nerdy uncle. And I was like, see, that's wrong, but it was funny. But
Yeah.
anyway, it led to the conversation about the Gremlins, and then the realization that Gremlins is a Christmas movie. Takes place at Christmas. They've got gifts. That's the whole reason for Gizmo going to the boy in the first place. His father's looking for a gift for him for Christmas, and he stumbles into this
Mm,
dirty Chinese um, underbelly shop and finds Gizmo and
mm,
gives it to him. And so that, of
mm,
course, led us to watching Gremlins and just watching the magic and wonder of the movie affect my child. And of course, all the questions. And then at the end, she's just like, and you watched this as a kid. And this was okay. And I was like, yes, murderous creatures that wreak havoc in a small town was perfectly fine when I was growing up. What are you talking about?
yeah.
We'd watched the Goonies last week, which again the same thing: bunch of children running around, completely unsupervised, crawling through caves and tunnels and solving murder mystery uh, uh, puzzles and clues and traps and stuff, all while being chased by escape
Right.
cons and developmentally challenged individuals. Yeah, perfectly fine. Yeah,
Mm,
when you sum the movies up, you kind of be like,
yeah.
lots of problems here.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that and making our way through certain ones. We did not watch A Christmas Story, because I'll be honest, I don't think I ever really enjoyed that movie. That's the one with Ralphie and he wants the Red
Yeah.
Ryder BB gun and
Mhm.
all that. I don't think I ever really enjoyed that movie that much, and so it just doesn't top my radar.
Ah, that's fun.
Well, and then they did a sequel.
That was always our family.
Yeah,
Did
they did
they?
a
To
sequel, and
that one?
it's like it's
Oh.
some 30, 40 years later, and
Oh,
it's Ralphie only as an adult.
I think
Yeah, and you can watch it now. We didn't. Don't worry, I didn't, but I know that it
right.
exists.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it's there. But I was looking for like I just kind of got into this mood of just movies from my childhood that I remembered watching and wanting to watch them with her. Like I found Flight of the Navigator, and that's an interesting movie. I highly recommend you watch it. It's a great sci-fi movie. This kid who gets a hold of a very odd-looking metallic ship and is cruising all over the place. I think he's looking for his parents, only to realize like he's an alien or half alien or something like that. It's been a while since I've seen it, but you should watch that one. And then there's this movie that I cannot find, and it almost makes me feel like I've made it up, and I've talked to other people about it, and no one seems to know what movie I'm talking about. So, David, I'm going to describe it for you, and if you know it, great. If anyone else hears it and knows it and can tell me the title of this movie, I would greatly appreciate it. In this movie, there are three kids, all boys, and one is like he's super nerdy. Then you've got one who's like the bad kid from the other side of the tracks or whatever, right? And then there's another one who's kind of like he's like when he's with them, he's obviously their leader, but outside of them, he's kind of shy and not talkative, right? But when the three of them together, they're like the best of friends, and they
Sounds like the
somehow
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles minus what? Mikey?
being teenage, yeah, being
Yeah.
teenage mutant, they're little. They're like I think they're like preteens, if I had to guess their age.
Well, the
So anyway, the
Chipmunks.
smart one, yeah, the smart one, he's probably the richest one of the group. His parents are also brilliant scientists in their own right, but they're kind of scatterbrained, absent-minded individuals. And so he's like smart but with common sense. So he's like building all this stuff in their basement, and they end up um receiving a signal from outer space. And based upon the signal, they're able to download some information, which allows them to create a bubble. All right. It's a perfect solid bubble that they can control it through their 80s technology, of course, because 80s technology was amazing back then, and they're
Of
able to
course it was.
create this bubble and whip around, and make they do all these kind of crazy experiments with it, ultimately deciding that what better thing to do with this untested alien technology than to build a spaceship encapsulated in the bubble with us in it, of course, and then we are going to trace the signal back to its source, wherever it may lead. That's what they do. They build a spaceship out of like trash cans and half of a bus and some other nonsense that doesn't make sense to anybody but stupid children. Then they encapsulate it in said bubble, and using their computer program, they're able to fly this thing all over the place. They like watch a movie for part of the time, then they start to go up into outer space. At which what at one point, now that they're clear of interference from Earth, the signal gets hijacked and it's pulling them into outer space. It makes them dock with this alien ship where they find these two bulbous green aliens, a male and a female, who proceed to play the music and dance. And they have this great little time where they're just, singing these songs and everything else. And then they're like, you should come to Earth, you should, introduce yourselves and all this other kind of stuff. And the aliens are like, nope, because while your music is great, we've been watching all of your programming and we see how y'all treat people. And it's like this whole thing about, there's war and famine and disease and all the bad, right? All the bad stuff. And it's like, if you guys fix this stuff, then we'll be back and we'll be your friends. And so then of course they make their way back, but then they run out of power and the ship almost crashes. And then there's of course the normal teenage stuff in there. There's the girl that they've got the crush on, and the one finally gets his first kiss from the girl, and all that in this sci-fi alien movie with these kids. And I know I've seen it a few times, but I know it's been a long time since I think the last time I watched it, I was maybe 12, 13 years old. So it's right at that time where I could be convinced that maybe I made this up, but at the same time I know I didn't make it up. I know that this is a legit movie. But no one seems to know what I'm talking about. No one seems to have heard
Right.
anything about it, and I can't find it. So if someone can
Huh.
find it, um, I'd appreciate it. So I just don't remember what it was called at all. So, but
Okay.
that's what we've been spending
Okay.
our time doing for my kids' winter break. We got a few more
Okay.
movies we're going to go through before it's all over, before she has to finally go back to school. But that's basically been our plan. And then come first of the year, just kind of off to the races, rolling, doing some new stuff. And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Gotcha.
But we're not here to talk about all that, as I like to
Nope.
say. We are here to talk about Profit and Lace. Would you like to give the recap, or do you want me to do it?
I can do it. I'm happy to give it a go. Ah, okay. All right. So here we go. Season 6, episode 23, Profit and Lace. This is a Quark heavy episode. Quark is giving a review, an employee review of one of his Dabo girls. She's been working with him for 3 months, and he praises her as very nice. She doesn't spill anything, hasn't missed an order. She is beloved by both patrons and other employees. But he ends this employee review, unfortunately, with some sexual harassment, saying, "I want a little bit extra from you because while you might be nice to everyone else, I'm the one who actually can fire you. So read up on this agreement for some umaks, so you know what I want from you." And he's trying to convince her to go ahead and sign it right then and there. But Rom rushes in and says he can't contact Ferenginar. He tried talking to their mother. He couldn't contact her. He couldn't contact the Grand Nagus. He can't contact anyone on Ferenginar. He's worried that the Dominion has conquered the planet. So they go to Ops, and Kira and Cisco and the others say, nope, there's no evidence that Ferenginar has been attacked. Um, but it turns out there's a ship coming to the station, and on it are the Grand Nagus and their mother, Ishka. And the Grand Nagus explains that he recently introduced a new bill of opportunities to the Ferengi Congress that would allow women to wear clothes, which I guess did pass, and that allowed women to start kind of traveling about the planet, which caused such upheaval that everything, including the like communications array, was affected and kind of lost power or something. Like things have gone so crazy on Ferenginar because women are allowed to wear clothes and go out into society and make money, make profit, that things have kind of gotten out of hand. And that has meant that the Grand Nagus Zek has been replaced by none other than former liquidator Brunt, who is now the acting Grand Nagus, which is said over and over and over, acting Grand Nagus, acting Grand Nagus. So he's come to Grand Nagus Zek and Ishka have come to the station to try and find a new base to kind of rally their allies to make sure that Brunt doesn't take over the Grand Nagus position. And so Quark, Rom, and Nog try and contact all of the Ferengi commissioners and get them to come to DS9 so that they can rally around Zek. But unfortunately, only one commissioner agrees. The one in charge of uh, what is it? Something cola, slug cola.
Sluggo
Um,
Cola, Nova,
yeah,
FCA, liquidator Nova, who made his
yeah,
fortune off of Sluggo Cola, is the only one
exactly.
who's agreed to meet with him.
He's the only one. Um, it turns out that Brunt has found out about the meeting, has come to DS9, and has basically stopped all communications with all the other commissioners. Um, because he has not yet been officially installed in the Grand Nagus position, there is still 3 days with which to do so. He is basically come to kind of lord it over the Grand Nagus and everyone else that he's about to win. But he also reveals that he knows that um, Nilva is going to be coming, and basically just is there to gloat. Um, so Quark, being upset by all this, he knows that Brunt wants to destroy him, that his mother has been working on the Grand Nagus Zek to get this bill passed to allow him to wear clothes, and that's what's caused all these problems. He and his mother get into a big argument where Quark says she's the worst thing that not only happened to him, but to Zek and to all Ferengi kind. The worst thing that ever happened to Ferengi society, which causes her to have a heart attack and forces her to receive a heart transplant from Dr. Bashir. Um, so Ishka was supposed to be the one who was going to communicate to Nilva about the importance of letting women wear clothes and what benefits it will bring to Ferengi society, but she's now out of commission. So how are they going to have a woman stand up and talk to Nilva about how women can be of importance? So they come up with the brilliant idea of having Quark pose as a woman via the technology that allows someone to change their appearance to look like a different race. Well, apparently, it can also make you of the opposite gender, opposite sex, and so Quark is made into the woman named Lumba, and is quickly trained in the ways of womanhood and ways to walk and talk so he can be a convincing female for Nilva to appreciate, which he is able to successfully do to the point that Nilva starts actually becoming attracted and outright starts pursuing, quite literally, Quark around his quarters and attempts to get Lumba to give her affection to him. Brunt bursts in and says, "That's not a female Lumba, that's a male Quark who is desperately trying to, rally things for the for Zek's position." But Quark decides to prove his femaleness by literally flashing everyone in the room and proving he has the female parts that he says he does. And that is enough for Nilva to be satisfied. And he decides to put his support behind Zek, which ultimately is enough for Zek to somehow maintain his position as Grand Nagus in the long run. And so Quark, having experienced what life is like as a Ferengi female, including what it means to wear clothes and everything else, comes out of his sex change operation back to his old self. But because the hormones are still causing him to experience female emotions, he not only asks Odo to give him a small hug, but even allows his poor Ferengi or his poor Dabo girl to pass on the Umox request, and he even ups uh, her pay by 3 strips of latinum, even though she actually was willing to perform the Umox. It turns out. So that's our episode. Sexual harassment, the episode
Yeah.
DS9. Uh, my goodness, quite the episode. Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go.
This is an episode that did not age well. Just
No.
didn't. It it's one of those things about Star Trek that has they've utilized it a lot. It's been got, and it's almost to the point where it's taken as kind of a given that yeah, at some point in the future we will have the ability to drastically surgically alter someone's body and make them look like whatever we want. Right? We've seen the episode where Cisco and Odo and O'Brien were turned into Klingons. We've seen, even on the original series, Kirk was temporarily turned into a Romulan. And they've all done it. They've all had these episodes where they have to go undercover looking like something else. Voyager does it, and I think they become Borg at one point. Um, it's problematic to say the least because I understand, like, out of universe, they've got the makeup right there and they're just slapping a bunch of prosthetics on and there you go. But the whole thought is this is supposed to be, they are manipulating the physical structure of these people to make them look this way. Heck, Strange New Worlds has even done it already in this in such a news show. They've done it and they went the opposite route. Instead of it being surgical alterations, they manipulated the genome of the individuals and gave them injections to make them appear like these aliens they were trying to infiltrate. So I don't know which method would be better. I don't know if it's a combination of genetic modification as well as surgical alterations. Discovery did hardcore surgery on a guy who was Klingon to make him appear human, and they go through some detail describing that process. Cutting him open and shaving down his bones and removing bones and all kinds of horrible things they did to him to make him pass as human. But this is the first time we've kind of seen them do it in this kind of gender bender type demeanor, and I don't know. I just feel like it's something that they don't do enough to highlight just how drastic of a change this is for a person. I can't imagine like the psychological whatever you'd have to prepare yourself for to even if it is just temporary, you're going to go through this. And like with Quark, we see here, it's not just a physical change, it's also a physiological one. We hear him complaining about the hormones throwing him off, and he's trying to adjust to that. And then on top of that, he's got to learn this convoluted plot they've got going here as well while attempting to impersonate a woman. It's just a lot. And I feel like they maybe should have done this differently or not at all.
Well, it is interesting you point out that Star Trek, by using this idea, this technology that can basically turn you into a different species. Well, I mean, what's the old joke? Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Where we treat each other as different species sometimes. Um, so it was a question that I think was there. Can the technology give you a gender switch operation? Can it do that? And what would the effects of that be? I mean, it's interesting that that's what the reason this is an interesting choice for this episode is because they went full bore into Quark's sexism. And not just his sexism, but his sexual abuse. I mean, he starts this episode by effectively saying, I want sexual favors from you. I'm pleased by your good performance, but that's just more proof that you need to take a step up and do the next thing. Um, I mean, with the Me Too movement we had a couple years ago, and the not Epstein, but who was not Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein. The idea was is that's exactly how that happened. It was the casting couch. If you want a job here, you got to do me a favor. Um, and so to choose that as the context with which to explore what does it mean for a man to live in women's shoes, and vice versa, which didn't happen, but you know this is a pretty dark place to do that questioning. I mean, maybe it's the right place because hey, if you're gonna do it, go all the way. But man, yeah, this episode was going to went started in a dark place and went to a dark place, because I feel like it's pretty well insinuated that, yeah, Quark as a woman allowed Nova to find his happiness. I mean, I'm trying to be cautious here. You know what I'm saying? Like I mean, he was running away from the guy 2 minutes earlier, but when Quark, or sorry, uh when Brunt walks in, it's like he has to commit to what he's started, and so now he's willing to go all the way. Um, I mean, it really is an interesting choice. Like Quark is literally fleeing from this guy, screaming. You know, he's doing everything he can to try and escape Nova's advances. And then Brunt walks in, says, "That's actually a man," and Quark not only pulls his clothes open to reveal his feminine features, but again, it's insinuated that they move on from that scene, and we come back, and Quark is reminiscing positively about Nova. I mean, it's just a lot. I guess the question really is like, was Star Trek in this episode trying to reference the real life problem of sexual harassment, or was it just a tool for the story? Because as we just mentioned with Harvey Weinstein, a lot of people seem to indicate, excuse me, a lot of women seem to be saying that this is more regular than we want to really acknowledge. It's more of a problem than we want to realize.
I
And so for this episode to treat it almost casually, especially by the end, I mean, again, the woman he was sexually harassing at the beginning of the episode comes back to him at the end of the episode and says, "Oh yeah, actually, I was willing to. It did sound fun giving you umox." Um,
right,
yeah,
and it's
that's where it,
supposed to
it
be
really,
like I think this is one of those issues that I have with Star Trek that um it crops up rarely. And it's where obviously we have these people from different cultures, different backgrounds, and so they obviously have very different ways of doing things. But when you become a part of the Federation, you sign the Federation Charter, you are a Federation member, world member, planet member, civilization, then there is this kind of expectation that there are certain rules that everyone has agreed to follow to be a part of the Federation. For the most part, the Federation Council and Starfleet and everything else, they pretty much stay out of the way um, of how you run your planet, so long as these
mhm,
overarching rules you have to abide by. Now, I know
right,
that the Ferengi Alliance is its own separate thing. They've got their own
right,
little empire going on. They are allies to the Federation, but they are not members of the Federation. So that gives
right,
them a little bit more of a pass, gives them a little bit more of a pass, but not much, especially when you have people like Quark who set up um, business establishments on Federation run installations, operations.
mm,
Because
yeah,
to me, it says that because the Federation is still saying, all right, I mean, we're open, we'll let anybody set up a business here, but there are still certain things you are going to have to abide by to do your business here with us. If you
right,
don't like it, you can go somewhere else. We're certainly not stopping you. But and there are a lot of perks to doing business with the Federation, as Quark found out when Cisco kind of pulled his bill once before. He puts in maintenance requests and it gets handled by those top-notch Federation engineers. He's not paying any kind of utility
right,
fees or rental fees or anything like that. It's all provided for him because he just happens to be a member of the station's community. That's just it.
hmm,
Anybody that comes there can get room and board and space and whatever else, and there's no charge for that because that's how the Federation operates. But one thing we also know is the Federation does not tolerate sexual harassment, exploitation of any kind, and the fact that Quark is able to continuously get away with it, it's just like, how much of a blind eye is Cisco and Odo and them kind of turning? And
yeah,
you'd almost say that Quark gets a greater, gray area to operate in because while it is a Federation run station, it's not owned by the Federation. It's owned by Bajor. And Bajor
Right.
is not a member of the Federation yet. And they recognize
Mhm.
how important Quark's business is to not just the Bajoran people, but also all the business coming through the wormhole. So having someone like him there with a little bit more flexibility will pay off. So maybe
Right.
that's maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but I still feel like at some point they should have come down on him about the sexual exploitation of his uh, staff. Because this isn't the
Yeah.
first time this has come up. We've seen little bits of that with Lita. We saw
Hmm.
this a little bit also with Marta. We
Hmm.
he's done this before, and there should be somebody who's like, "Hey, look,
Yeah.
not okay. Like we let you slide, but you need to rein it in." You
Right.
know, Picard gives a great speech in Next Generation when Worf runs off and goes after Duras. He gives him a great speech about what it means to be in the Federation and in Starfleet, and the number of people who have signed up from different races and everything else, but they've all committed. You've made the choice to commit to Starfleet and the Federation's rules and ideals and principles. And if you can't
Right.
honor that, then you are free to leave. So
Right.
that's always one thing I like to point out when stuff like this comes up, because it is a bit problematic the way that they don't really talk about that when I feel like they should. They should talk about it more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how Quark's presence is definitely seen as it's an agreement of convenience between all three parties: the Federation, Bajor, and Quark himself. Um, I feel like the Federation allows Quark to stay on the station because he's a honey trap. He attracts all these criminals to himself, and then Odo snags them up. Like, you're stupid to work with Quark because he's so close to the Federation in terms of his proximity. He's in a gray zone, but um, yeah, that's how I feel like that's why they let him stay, is because they're using him to get to worse people, and I think that can be said to have been proven out a number of times. Um, but with a certain laxity at times as well. I mean, it's not like the Federation, has some sort of FBI task force ready to swoop in and save or handle these issues. They let Odo handle it, and Odo, again, is supposed to just be part of the Bajoran enforcement arm. So maybe that's just how it works. Is like it's like the FBI passing on, uh, some big case down to the local police force to capture their guy. Just they're happy to let the guy get taken off the board. Just they don't need the credit. Maybe like the Federation doesn't need money, they don't need the credit. Um, but yeah, you're totally right. Like, this is not the first time Quark has done something like this. Like, yeah, what the heck? Oh my gosh.
So in doing some research for this episode, I was just taking a look at some of the things that they were saying were going on behind the scenes, and I thought it was interesting to point out the fact that when this script was originally written, it was supposed to be a bit more of a lighter comedy, considering the kind of dark current that had been flowing through much of season 6. They had wanted this to kind of bring some of that levity back, and the Ferengi have typically been used in this manner. We can get a little bit of drama out of them, sure, but overall, the story is supposed to be a bit more, have more comedic beats than not. But apparently, the issue is that both Armin Shimmerman and Alexander Siddig, Dr. Bashir,
Mhm.
who directed this episode, um, didn't view this episode the same way. Quark definitely, or Armin Shimmerin, who plays Quark, definitely thought this was an opportunity for some greater growth and development for Quark, especially with the whole sexism thing. Something that he still says to this day is, something that they didn't nail at all in this episode. He feels like Quark didn't really learn anything from his experience of being transformed into a woman and having to act as a woman and a woman in Ferengi society. It was an opportunity for him to kind of comment on that, which they've really kind of skirted around and some other things, but um, never really nailed down.
Right.
And then uh, Dr. Bashir, in his with his direction, he also seemed to want to play more into a dramatic, a darker tone. I think he was kind of going with what the rest of the um, season had been about. So when you've got these two people who are really kind of king in making your story work, who are not picking up on the comedic beats of what was written, you do kind of get weird, uneven episode, and a lot of the comedy tends to fall flat. Oddly, the person who came out the most comedic in all of this was Rom, with his seemingly innate knowledge of what it took to appear to be a woman or to be woman-like, with how to walk, how to sit, how to talk,
Hmm.
what to wear, things like that. To which, we keep getting the constant, why is everybody looking at me statement, which was supposed to be, again, a funny, continuous joke, running joke throughout the episode, which doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that it's interesting that that was the issue, that these two were so committed to a totally different perspective on the same writing that it threw everything off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the idea that the Ferengi are so backward compared to us as a mirror to us to see how we compare is
Mhm.
an interesting idea. But it's so, I mean, they go so boldly into the
Yeah,
bizarreness of what they choose to do with it, especially the nakedness. Like every time they see their mother, they comment that she's not naked. And I just feel like for a show that, I don't know, I mean, would you say this show was always intended to be family friendly, or was it supposed to be skirting that? Like this is more for 13
I
plus,
I
or
think that I think that obviously in the 60s and then in the 80s with Next Generation, it was definitely supposed to be, still kind of family oriented, but it was recognizing the fact that people were getting older, right?
sure,
So that kind of fun campiness of the 60s went away, and now it's, we're dealing with young adults.
sure,
We want shows that speak to young adults and adults at large. So still families can watch this show, but we are going to be a little bit harder hitting in our material. And then we come to Deep Space Nine, which Deep Space Nine, as we've talked about many times before, was kind of the show that everyone forgot. They stopped paying attention to. And by the time it circled back around to being something that people paid attention to, it was much darker. It was very distant from what had started out before. And this was definitely adult programming. This was not young adult stuff. This isn't coming of age stuff. We're dealing with PTSD victims. We've got a war going. We've got, identity crisis left and right. We got like very, hard hitting issues here that without time and experience, you're not going to you're not going to have any frame of reference for a lot of these things.
right,
That's why in a way, it's one of the things that draws me back to Deep Space Nine, because as I get older and I experience certain things, as much as I love the Next Generation and I always will, there's more that you can identify in your life with Deep Space Nine than you can with Next Generation, because in Next Generation, a lot of the problems were external versus Deep Space Nine, where a lot of the problems are internal. And I feel like we struggle more with internal things than we do external. Some of us, I mean, some people, it's the other way around. I'm totally, aware of that. But I'm just saying, for me personally, I feel like that's why Deep Space Nine works for me. Um, Now, when it comes to the Ferengi, the problem I see is that when we are first introduced to them in Next Generation, we are told that they're like humans, how humans were several centuries ago from their frame of reference. So that would mean humans now,
right, yeah,
us, that we are like the Ferengi.
right,
Well, I really think that, and again, if you remember in Next Generation, we don't really see the Ferengi very much.
right.
But when we do see them, they are very much into money and scheming and being ruthless, and that's what they were about. The women thing was kind of there, but it wasn't as apparent as it becomes in Deep Space Nine, to the point where in Deep Space Nine, they kind of lose their minds when women are
Yeah.
around. They're still ruthless. They still want to cut deals, but women seem to make them throw all other cares and concerns out the window.
Right.
Grand Nagus Sek, the supposed greatest mind in Ferengi history, has totally been laid to waste by Ishka.
Right.
Nilva, this great entrepreneur in his own right, and Sluggo Cola being super successful to the point where his one vote could be the deciding factor in whether or not Zek gets power again, is also completely flummoxed by Lumba,
Right.
you know, and even with Zek knowing that Lumba was really Quark, he also couldn't really keep his hands off of her
Yeah.
a bit, you
Yeah.
know. So it's like they've really kind of exaggerated this. So I've always felt like, except for Quark and except for Nog, I feel like somebody really didn't like the fact that people kept saying Ferengi were us, so they had to exaggerate them to show a clear distinction between them and us because
Yeah.
they didn't like that comparison. And that's why we have these weird Ferengi that come out. And they all have an odd, if you notice in Deep Space Nine, they all have a singular obsession with something. Quark is always chasing his own profit.
Right.
Um, Nog wants to stand out from his entire family. He's almost obsessive with it. Ishka wants to be the first woman to do
Right.
anything, really. Um, Rom is fiercely dedicated to his family. Brunt wants to be
Grand
Grand
Nagus.
Nagus. We've seen, Gala, who's the weapons merchant. He's cornered the market on that. And you've got the one that was a mercenary. Like they all are very hyper focused on one thing in particular, and then they use their Ferengi ness
Right.
to go after it to such an
Right.
extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I've said this before, so I'll say it one more time. The idea that certain races would champion certain traits, like, and again, the more easy example of what I'm trying to explain is like Dune, the desert planet, Hoth, the ice planet. Like Earth as a planet has ice areas and desert areas and forests. Like Earth is everything. But in sci-fi, especially, they feel this need to simplify things, and it makes sense to make it so you can understand characters and
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, if you, I've always hated that trope because you're right. A lot of science fiction does it. These people are from this planet and it's the ice planet, it's the swamp planet, it's the whatever. Like, what would we say Earth is? The ocean planet? Like, what is it? Like, what would you say that we
yeah,
are? And then that
right,
becomes
right,
like, their entire feature. Well, I grew up on a desert planet, so that's why I'm this sad sack all the time or whatever, or I
right,
grew up on an ocean planet and that's why I'm weak minded and I go with the flow and I'm whatever. It's like, why though? Like, you can have diverse ecosystems and
right,
still produce these terrible people,
right,
there's nothing that says that you can't. And Star Trek has really kind of, I wouldn't say cornered the market, but they've definitely had a very strong helping hand in that all Vulcans look the same and dress the same and act the same. They've
right,
only fairly recently have they kind of moved out from that.
right,
All Romulans look the same, dress the same, got that terrible haircut.
right,
Um, you know, that's all they ever do with them. And we've seen the same thing with Klingons to a point, and they've kind of branched out on Klingons and giving us Klingon history and background and things like that. And they've kind of fixed it in later iterations.
right,
But yeah, it's this very cut and dry, one dimensional. You're all from this planet, so you all do this. It's like, why? We don't do that. We don't have everybody here who is all following one religion or one political movement, or we all live in one type of climate setting, region, whatever it is. We don't, our entire population isn't concentrated down to an area. So I don't know why they insist on doing that
right.
um, in sci-fi. I wish they would stop.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring it up in regards to this episode and the Frankie in particular, when you compare, like, the reason women didn't show up in the workforce like they do in modern day you could say it's sexism and men hated women and they kept them out of places, and there's certainly examples of where that's true. But the biggest thing that changed the reality for women in terms of workforce and what they could do was the pill. The ability to control how often they would get pregnant and in a regular fashion allowed them the freedom to work consistently. Now, you can say that there are still issues there today. Fine, I'm not arguing that. My point, though, is that this episode presents the Ferengi as so backward that no one has ever considered women as a workforce that might help drive profit before. Like that's kind of where it gets silly. It's like this race is supposed to be thinking about every single possible angle on every single issue, and oh, just in the last couple of years has the issue of women's rights and how that might drive the workforce has has been brought forward. Maybe it's because yeah, all the Ferengi just can't handle the presence of a woman and they just lose their minds. But it seems kind of silly. So
I mean, that would almost make a little bit more sense than what they give us. It's
yeah,
just it doesn't make any sense when they you know, because I thought about that too. It's like none of y'all ever considered like all of a sudden like jewelry alone, your sales of jewelry supposedly, because I mean women, they're all adorned, as we see Ishka and we see Lumba when she makes her grand appearance. No one ever considered, oh, you know what, I could corner the market by being an exclusive offerer of exotic jewelry for women. Like
right,
no one considered that. No one thought that was about. Like as soon as I saw Ishka dressed, I was like, someone should be making women's dresses right now. Like
right,
right now, go out there and sell them. You've got thousands, millions. He said that they're 53% of the population, billions of women who have no clothes.
right.
Sell them. You're an overnight success, even if they only wear them inside their home. Yeah, you've cornered a market.
Yeah,
Why not?
right.
Makes no sense to me. But for people who are so financially focused,
Hmm.
no one made that argument.
Yeah,
And yeah, as it's pointed out, you could double your workforce,
and your
double your
customer base.
customer base, everything instantly. Yeah, everything instantly doubles.
Yeah,
Your profits double overnight because you suddenly opened your market to a whole other portion of your society, and they're right there.
right.
You don't have to travel and establish a moon base or a bar on a space station or
Yeah,
whatever. They're right there next door.
yeah, yeah,
And that's the other thing too, for Quark to for any Ferengi really to leave the planet and go elsewhere and do business, and you've got no problem doing business with women from other cultures,
right,
and yet at home Ferengi women aren't allowed to do
right.
anything. It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
And all this reminds me, I think it was season 2, right? Where Quark has a woman in his staff and doesn't realize it. She has to um reveal
Pell,
herself. Yeah.
yes, and
Like
I think that's season 3,
I know it's one of the early ones. Yeah.
but yeah.
I just feel
Mhm.
like that character, like where's that character amongst all this stuff going on now? Because he didn't freak out when she was around. When she revealed herself as a woman.
He
Well,
did.
I mean, in terms of
He's
her being like, "Oh my gosh, I love you immensely. You're a woman, and I need you." No, he was upset that she had lied to him, basically. But instead of like reconcile, well, he did kind of reconcile himself to her a bit. But my point is,
Well, when he first, if you remember, when he first found out that she was a woman, he fainted
yes,
in the bar. He passed
okay,
out,
I don't remember that
and
scene,
then
but
later on, he convinced her. Yeah, he convinced her that she needed to keep herself covered
right,
up for the sake of the deal. She does end up revealing herself later on, but even the Grand Nagus is like, "Speak of this to no
right,
one." And then the episode ends with her leaving the station to go. I think she goes to Vulcan
yeah, to find
first,
her way
anyway.
somewhere
You know,
else.
we don't know where she yeah, we don't know where she went after that, but her first stop was supposed to be Vulcan.
Right. So I mean, like a character like her, like she's the only other female Ferengi other than their mother, that we've seen. So I feel like this episode might have benefited more, not from Quark dressing up as a woman, but let's have other women show up and see how much they're ready
Yeah,
to
yeah,
like are they really willing to go with the new changes? Like maybe they're kind of maybe some of these women have like Stockholm syndrome. Some of them are accustomed to their position and don't want the change. They're afraid of the change, um there's a woman who wants to to make changes, but she doesn't feel confident to argue it in front of someone else, and so that character has to stand up. Now, of course, the reason that doesn't happen is twofold. First off, Quark is one of our main characters, so we want the action and drama to be focused on him, or at least one of our main characters. And this episode gave us a chance to explore the sci-fi technology that allows you to change your appearance, and apparently to such an extent that it literally changes your gender. So it's I understand why this episode went the way it did, but like for example, I mean Quark, I mean Armin Shimmerman dressed up as a woman. Like, did they give him thick thighs, or did he have thick thighs? Like, you know what I
I'm
mean?
sure
Like,
that it was feminine padding.
yeah, like what? How much was that was him? How much of that was makeup? I mean, he's always been covered in makeup. Don't get me wrong, but this is the first time where I like needed someone to tell me like where it truly did end. Oh man,
I think that was the whole I think he was really just wearing like a padded suit, like that
yeah,
dress or whatever it was he was
yeah.
wearing was basically a suit that he just,
Was put with.
that he put on and,
Well, the one thing
that was
the
that,
most bizarre thing, of course, about the change is they gave him smaller ears because the Ferengi women supposed to have smaller ears, but they drastically undersized his ears comparatively. And talking about like with that Klingon, they had to like file the bone down. I'm like, where did his ears go? Like, how do you get your ears back? Oh
Yeah,
man, there's so many questions that get answered.
yeah, like what was that procedure? Um, what was that procedure to reduce the ears? Did you just shrink them down and you're gonna just inflate them later? Like what
Inflate them.
what's the process? I mean, I'm
Yeah,
just wondering, like, what is it? There's so much to that, and like I said, all of the Trek shows have done it, where members of the crew have been modified in some particular regard. I think the worst one that was done was Enterprise. There's an episode where um, Captain Archer and his security officer Malcolm Reed go to this pre-warp society, and they're studying them, and they've got these markings on the sides of their forehead here, kind of look like bony protrusions. And the whole premise of the episode is that they went down there to, kind of just watch the development of these people. They come back, and Malcolm, that's the security officer, he realizes he's forgotten a piece of technology. He's misplaced a piece of technology. So they have to go back down and find it because obviously they can't have these aliens finding it.
right.
But of course, in their attempt to do so, they get captured, and there's a scuffle. And at one point, Captain Archer gets knocked around a couple of times. He gets, punched and whatever, and the prosthetic comes off on the side of his head. And so the guy, recognizing that it's peeling off, reaches over and pulls it like latex off of his head. And I'm like, now wait a minute. You told me, like when the episode started, you were saying how the doctor had done this remarkable job of making you look like these aliens. But if all that was a piece of, you know, costume latex, what did you need the doctor, your highly skilled, multiple degreed doctor, do for you? Why did he need to be the one to do that? I mean, hell, just go down to the art class and let the kids draw on your face for all the good that was going to do you, and got knocked off because you got belted across the head a couple of times. I'm fully expecting, like, the way that, especially the way they present it later on in other episodes of other shows, like, again, Deep Space Nine, where, Cisco and everybody were turned into Klingons. It was surgery. It was complex surgery to get them to look that way. So
Right.
obviously this technology is not consistent, um, and I guess you could say that all those shows kind of feature a development stage, because Enterprise was the 22nd century, then we see Kirk in the 23rd, as well as Strange New Worlds in the 23rd, and then Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, the 24th. Now having the benefit of greater time, greater technique, and so forth, they can do this thing. So,
Yeah.
but still interesting.
Yeah. I guess what I want to
Oh,
say
that's a good
is,
point.
what's that?
Sorry, I was just reading the comments in our chat here. I'll put that up. It
Yeah.
seems like they wanted to
Vincent.
do Tootsie in
Yeah.
space. That's actually a good point because it turns out that Armin Shimmerman, in doing research for how to play a woman, he watched a couple of movies where the lead male actor dressed up as a woman, and one of those movies that he watched was Tootsie, and he said that he did
Mhm.
take more of his cues from that movie than the other one that he watched. It was Some Like It Hot was the other movie that he watched. And he said
Mhm.
that movie was basically the same thing, but he felt like the actor in Some Like It Hot kept doing these winks and nods to the camera to be like, yes, I'm a
We all
man
know
dressed
what's
as a
going
woman, but
on.
I know
Yeah.
it. Right. We all know what this is here. Whereas Tootsie was more, this is a man dressed as a woman who is really trying to live in that space of presenting as a woman. And
Right.
so he
The
went with that one
seriousness
to
of
make
the
it more
subject
authentic.
was being treated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that um it's it in acting, for most of human history, actors were men. It's just interesting to think about. Like, for a lot of roles when women were on stage, it wasn't actually women; it was men dressed as women playing those parts. And when you think about that, when I think about that, I think about, we did Two Gentle Men of Verona, but we did it as Two Gentle Women of Verona. The director decided to gender swap the main roles because it's two women and two men, but the men dress up as, or the women have to dress up as men at some point, which means that male actors were playing female characters dressed as men, which just doesn't, it just convoluted. And so for us to make it fun, we had the gender swapped. And I remember one of the male leads came on stage dressed as a woman, because that's supposed to be the part where the gender swap happens on stage. And he looks terrible. Like, he's not a. I remember this guy. He was a great actor, but he wasn't a particularly attractive dude to begin with. And so for him to walk on stage in tight leather pants and a blonde wig and high heels didn't do him any favors. And he's supposed to be treated as now this beautiful, lovely creature that, ooh, who is this? And I just were laughing. Um, and I feel like that's kind of what happened here with the prosthetics around Quark. I mean,
Hmm.
to hear Nilva be like, I just can't stop. Like, you're so, or I guess it was Grand Nagus. Like, do you realize how attractive you are, Quark, as a woman? Um, I don't know. It's just, this has a history in the theater, um, but when it came down to that serious nature of sexual harassment, it I they didn't land it quite right. They just didn't land it
No.
quite right. They
And
decided to
that would have
go
been
with
the lesson that Cork needed to learn. But yeah.
yeah. The Dabo girl ending up being happy with the sexual harassment option. Like, that undermines everything that opening scene was supposed to be bringing home for us. And then, like, it turns into it turns into a scene to make fun of Quark, because now that he sympathizes with her because of the womanly emotions he now has, he now starts giving her a pay raise and utterly rejecting any sort of insinuation that he would ever want any sort of sexual favor. But that's literally what he was asking for, and so he never has to actually reconcile with his choice in that way. And that's why that part of the episode fails. um so yeah, it's this is an episode that I don't feel the need to revisit anytime soon.
So on
Yeah.
that note, I think it's great to point out the fact that whereas In the Pale Moonlight was ranked as one of the greatest episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, this one is ranked the worst. It beat out even Move Along
No,
Home
it didn't.
as
No, it
the
didn't. This
worst
is
episode. Yes, it did.
still better than that piece of garbage. Uh,
I think that it's just one of those things that, like I said, it aged poorly. It just
yeah,
a lot of it fell flat. There wasn't anything, and say what you want to about Move Along Home. There's nothing in that episode that
I will.
really, um, yes, I
Is
know, but
objectionable
there's
outside of the episode itself. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that's I think why it gets knocked down there. But yeah,
Yeah.
still not a great episode. And I'll go ahead and answer Vincent's question. No, this is not the worst episode. In David's opinion, that will always be Move Along Home.
Move along home.
We're going to do an
I mean, this
anniversary
episode
special for
was
Move
trying
Along
to
Home.
do something. Oh
Yes,
gosh, don't
Mo-
you dare.
we're
Keep your
we're going to do
mouth closed.
a we're going to do a
So
special anniversary episode of our show for Move Along
I
Home,
will be
and we're
killing myself on screen.
gonna we're gonna watch it again, and we're gonna talk about why it's so bad. It's good. That's what's gonna happen. I can feel it.
Oh my
It's gonna
gosh.
come. Well, I think that any other final thoughts on Profit and Lace before we close it out?
Nope. I think I said my piece.
All right. Well, again, before we do officially end everything here for our show, you can find us and follow us anywhere you happen to do your social medias. You can find us on Facebook. All right. We're not doing the other ones anymore. It's Facebook. All right. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please send them there. Love to hear from you. Anything else that you want to know about us, the show, so forth, we'll answer it there. Also, thanks to Vincent because he found that movie that I was talking about. It was called Explorers and it came out in 1985. I looked it up. I've got it here. And I knew there were some famous actors in it. Ethan Hawke was one of the kids in the movie, and
Mm,
River Phoenix was another one. So, yeah,
mm.
if you're interested at all, it's called Explorers. It came out in 1985. Go watch it. Um, tell me if you enjoy it or not. The Star Trek Section 31 movie is scheduled to release on January 24th, 2025. It'll be available for streaming on Paramount Plus on that day. I think I might do some kind of watch party for that because it's like the first Trek movie in like I don't know, 9 years. I think they said 9 or 10 years. So that'll be cool to see. Strange New Worlds is also set to drop later on in 2025. No official release date for season 3 just yet of that show, but it is scheduled to come out in 2025. The Star Trek. Starfleet Academy show is looking like it's going to get pushed yet another year. So I think they had initially said that it was also going to come out in 2025, but like towards the latter end of 2025. But now it's looking like it might not come out until 2026. So um, there you go. Find something else to do between now and then. All right. Other than that, I think that's going to do it for us on this episode. You can also listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to your podcast. I happen to do it on Spotify. So until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.